Chief EU Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier has told the UK it has 2 weeks to clarify its stance on the so-called divorce bill. If it doesn't, he says talks won't progress to trade. The two sides have been meeting in a new round of negotiations. RT's Polly Boyko has more. So, Polly, what's been happening in Brussels?
Well, it looks like it's Groundhog Day again, as David Davis and Michel Barnier faced off again after a 6th round of talks in Brussels. You may have had a frustrating sense of déjà vu.
We must now look ahead to moving our discussions onto our future relationship. For this to happen, both parties need to build confidence in both the process and indeed in the shared outcome. And we remain ready and willing to engage as often and as quickly as needed to secure this outcome over the weeks remaining ahead of the December European Council. But we need to see flexibility, imagination and willingness to make progress on both sides.
Des progrès réels et sincères.
Real and sincere progress. I have to present a sincere and real picture on the 3 key subjects to the European Council and the European Parliament. If that's not the case, then we will continue, and that will push back opening discussions on the future.
So just like in weeks before, David Davis called for Brussels to be more flexible and imaginative. And just like in weeks before, Barnier threatened that the talks wouldn't move on to trade until the 3 sticking points had been resolved. Those being the rights of EU nationals, the island border, and last but not least, that uncomfortable question of the estimated €60 billion Brexit bill. Speaking of which, the EU's chief negotiator made it quite clear that he's expecting an answer, or rather a figure, from London as a matter of priority.
Could you confirm for me that you will need clarifications or concessions from the UK within 2 weeks in order to move on to the second phase in December?
Ma réponse est oui.
There's 5 weeks to go until the summit in December, which will decide if the two sides are ready to move on to phase 2. But in reality, it's going to take the EU a few weeks to make a decision. So they're going to need the UK's answer on money a lot sooner. And that's bound to pump up the pressure in Brussels.
So there's loads going on in Brussels, government really under pressure there, but also under pressure back at home.
Yeah, because Theresa May's feeling the heat from the Remainers here. The Prime Minister used a newspaper article to announce that she won't tolerate any attempts to derail the Brexit process. So much so that she wants to enshrine the leaving date in law. If she gets her way, that'll be March 29th, 2019 at 11 p.m. After that, there'll be no going back, except apparently the whole thing can be reversed, at least according to the man who wrote Article 50.
The fact is that it's a political decision that has been made in this country to maintain that there can be no going back. Actually, as far as Brussels is concerned, as far as the treaty is concerned, this country still has a free choice about whether to proceed. As new facts emerge, people are entitled to take a different view, and there's nothing in Article 50 to stop them. I think the British people have the right to know this. They shouldn't be misled.
Lord Kerr also questioned the Prime Minister's decision to rush to deliver the letter to European counterparts before having a plan in place.
I don't know why Mrs May was in such a rush to send her letter in March before her cabinet had an agreed plan. It was odd to start the clock ticking and not start negotiating, instead calling an election. And I don't know why both government and opposition now seem to discount the possibility of seeking an extension. The provision for doing so is in the treaty.
Given the cabinet chaos the Prime Minister has had to deal with over the past week, rumours swirling around Brussels now suggest the Europeans are making contingency plans in case Theresa May is replaced as Conservative leader, or even if the Tories get ousted altogether by Labour. Speaking after the negotiations today, Michel Barnier said he wouldn't comment on internal politics in the UK, but he did say that they're watching the situation closely, as we all are. Laura.
Indeed we are. Polly, thank you very much. Well, earlier I spoke to UKIP MEP for the East Midlands, Margot Parker. She told me the EU is being unreasonable with its demands.
This is really down to the EU. They don't actually give us anything, and they'll say there are more demands because that's how they work. It's very unreasonable, I think, constantly to keep saying, well, you haven't given us enough, you haven't said enough, but we're not seeing anything particularly put on the table from them either. I mean, we'd like an agreement, but do you know what? If there isn't going to be an agreement, then I'm afraid we can walk away. And most of the people I speak to that voted to leave are getting extremely irritated with the constant demands from the EU.
It does seem to suggest that they are in charge, though, doesn't it? Michel Barnier is now given 2 weeks to settle a divorce bill. They're the ones setting the deadlines. They're the ones making the conditions. How has it got to that, do you think?
Well, I can only assume that the government really haven't sort of been on their game a little bit sharper. But I think, they're going to have to stand up and say, well, you know what? We'll have a tough Brexit. We will leave because we can. I mean, we have the rest of the world we can deal with. I mean, there are no deals with China, the United States or India. They trade quite freely. They don't have this oppression. So we can go.